So I'm here with Mike Handler today, and you had a great idea that we should be talking about during this time, and you brought it up to me. What was it?
I think this is pretty recent. That's within the last week or so. And yeah, we talked about. I'm a parent of four kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm aware of the fact that our kids are not raised in a vacuum,
Mm-hmm.
and we're in the midst of a crazy political season. I mean, it is a circus. No matter who you're voting for, what you believe in as far as parties or whatever goes, it is just crazy out there.
Yeah, and if you think your kids aren't absorbing it, you are probably not aware of how kids intuit from everything around them. They may not know the difference between Republican and Democrat, but they certainly can have a sense for the temperature because, if this anger that we're seeing so publicly displayed now has been beneath the surface, it's not beneath the surface anymore. It's part of our public discourse. And it's seeped into the way we speak to each other
Absolutely.
outside of the political realm.
Absolutely. I mean, like just as an example here, and this is maybe where the idea was birthed from. I drive my kids to school every morning, and last week my daughter, 7 years old, and very concerned, in a very angst-ridden voice, just said, "Dad, if that bad person gets to be president, this is going to be terrible." And she had so much fear and anxiety in her voice. Now, my wife and I, like, we're on the issues, but we don't talk about politics necessarily at home very much. So I know that my daughter is getting this from other places.
She's intuiting
She
from
absolutely
other places.
is.
We had a coworker who said his 14-year-old son is so concerned that he said he's lost hope for America's future.
Yeah.
Which is really very sad that you would think that a teenager like that wouldn't be going, wow, I'm ready to become an adult. He just sees no hope.
Yeah.
And so I think this is really a timely discussion and something that we can both speak into because there are children in both of our lives whom we love.
Absolutely.
And so what would you say? How do we talk to kids, or how do we get our mind around this political season?
Yeah, I think, and whether it's politics or whatever it might be, I think there's some basic principles that we can follow, right? So I think the first one, and this might sound so elementary, but I think it's very formative, is that we can't speak in this season in a posture of fear. I mean, so much of what we hear and what we see in the media is fear-based, if we're being honest with ourselves. It's all fear-based. And yet, we serve a God who says, don't be afraid of these things. I mean, Paul in Romans is very explicit in telling the believers in Rome, look, God is the one who put the governing authorities in place. And what your job is to do as a believer is to pray for them, to pray for the authorities.
And think about what a rough time it was for Christians
Oh,
during
my
the
goodness.
Roman times.
Yeah.
But you know what? They're gone.
Yeah.
They're gone. And God has that perspective. You think of the different eras that the church has faced. Communism, the wall in Berlin is down.
Yeah.
And it's not the powerhouse it once was. God knows the final chapter.
That's absolutely right. God is not surprised about who's going to be elected.
That's right. And so if he tells us not to be afraid, I think we should trust him on those things.
Not a bad place to start.
And for our children, I think one of the most important things then is that because they intuit about life, including things like faith, from the adults in their lives, the best gift you can give a child during this political season is your own strong faith. A faith that does not waver from God's goodness, a faith that does not think that the political world holds the answers, because it doesn't.
Absolutely.
And so, strengthen your own faith during this season and help your children see what it means to believe and trust in the God of the future.
Absolutely. And we know about the God of the future because of what the God has done in the past.
Right.
Like, our God has a track record of not failing.
That's right.
Of being above these
things.
things.
We can see it, and we need to show that to our kids. So what other kinds of things should parents be aware of?
And I think I touched on this in the first point, right? So as long as you're starting at a point where you're not starting with fear, there only leaves one practical solution, that's to have faith. And we express our faith through prayer oftentimes. So really what we need to do with our kids during this time as well is make sure that we're praying with them. praying with them not only for the state of their souls, right? Because they could be afraid, they could have a lot of anxiety, whatever it might be. But pray with them about the future. Pray with them about the country. Pray with them about the rulers. Again, Paul is very explicit about this. Pray for those rulers, those kings, and those principalities who are over you.
Whether you like them or not.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no preference there, right? You just pray.
So I would agree with that completely, and I would just add a little bit to make sure that all of the children you love have the toolkit that they need, the spiritual toolkit that they need. So I have a great example of this, and it's very touching, but on September 11th, a young father got on a plane, and his name was Todd Beamer. We know him because he was the one who said, "Let's roll," and I think there was a book that came out that's called "Let's Roll." But a lot of people don't know what he did before then. And when he saw he was in trouble, he picked up his cell phone, he called an operator, and kept calling until he found a Christian operator. He reached out for community, and then he asked for two things from her. He asked for her to recite with him Psalm 23.
Oh, wow.
Which is the first scripture a child learns usually, right? Yeah, Psalm 23. He went into this most basic Sunday school Awana toolbox for his adult needy hour, and then he asked for the Lord's Prayer, and she recited that with him. So I think it's really important that our children not only know about God, but they have the tools and know how to use them to combat fear. And even the smallest child, my mom taught me this because I had a lot of anxiety about dying at a certain point in my life, and she was determined not to stay with me through the whole night.
Parents like their sleep right in their own beds.
And so she was, giving me the tools I needed, and when she thought I had them, she was out of there. But this prayer, every child can do. It's on the knuckles, and it's this: I will never leave you. That's Jesus speaking. And so that's what she taught me. When you're afraid, look at your hand and go, I will never leave you. You're never alone. You're never by yourself, So I love the prayer, and I would just add to that, a couple other tools. Make sure your kids have a toolbox and they know how to use it.
Absolutely. And it doesn't need to be complex, right?
No, easy stuff.
It can be very simple, and it should be.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I would say is to understand that God's care is supernatural. That He is capable of having the final period no matter what we're going through. And I've got so many stories like this from when my kids were little, because they were in trouble a lot and I had to trust God, But at one point, Bren's in the principal's office, and I'm praying for him all day, and I'm thinking, praying things for him like, Bren, remember, even Jesus was falsely accused. You couldn't possibly have been this bad at school. And he comes home, he's happy that day, and I said, what happened? Were you in the principal's office? He said, oh yeah, I had a great time in the principal's office. I said, what? He said, that little girl in third grade that I have a crush on, she came in, and Mom, she talked to me. And I'm thinking, what did this amazing little chickie have to say that made it all better, that Mommy's prayers couldn't fix, and she asked me my name, and I was so shy I couldn't talk to her. My friend had to tell her my name, and then she said, what'd you do to get in trouble? And I couldn't tell her what we'd done to get in trouble. My friend had to say, and then she looked right at me and she said, you are so cute. I had a great time in the principal's office. That's a crazy story, but God is so active in our children's lives, and He really does not only desire, but is capable of answering their prayers with fireworks.
Absolutely.
And those are their God stories.
Absolutely.
So during this season, maybe God will be writing some amazing stories in your own children's lives. And it's not going to be the politicians who have the final word. It's not going to be the people who've risen to a hateful dimension in this culture who are going to have the final word. God is going to have the final word. And we just pray that our children will have a great spiritual growth track during this season.
Yeah, that's good. I think that comes back to the fact that their identity is ultimately, and our identity ultimately, isn't the country that we're a citizen of.
Yes.
That has some part to play, and we have responsibility there, but really, when we're believers, we're adopted into God's family. So we have a father, a good father, a righteous king. We're a part of a royal priesthood, and when we get to be a part of that, we have somebody who's in control, who loves us, who is good, and who is just, ultimately.
So that's the good news in this stinky election season.
Yeah, what a great opportunity, right? I mean, and this is what God does. He takes whatever the situation, right, and He works it for the good for those who believe in Him.
Let's trust that.